Hi everyone, and welcome to ABC's of Anesthesia. I've got a very special guest, Dev Raga from the Personal Finance Podcast. So, hey Dev, it's just a great pleasure to have you. Welcome to the ABC's of Anesthesia podcast.
Thank you so much, Laz, for inviting me over. And it was pretty random because I remember you just randomly texted me because one of your, friends knows me and sort of recommended that I come on. So really nice for you to just randomly reach out. So it's really nice to be here.
Yeah, cool. I'll give you a bit of an intro. So Dev, he's a Melbourne-based practicing doctor who brings clarity and simplicity to personal finance. I just love listening to your podcast because maybe it just reaffirms what I do. So it makes me feel good about my decisions. But you've got this podcast which I really recommend everyone to just have a look at and start from the first few episodes. It's called Dev Raga Personal Finance Podcast. And the reason I really want everyone to listen to this is because it's like this... I think ABC's Anesthesia a lot about anesthetic training and getting onto training, but not everyone will be able to get onto training. And that's not the long game. You're a doctor in Australia. And if you do these steps, it won't matter what training program you're in. You've already won the ticket. So his show, lots of great investing advice, taxation, superannuation, all to try and get financial independence. And as a bit of a background, first generation immigrant, similar to me, grew up in Adelaide. Your parents migrated from India in the early 1990s. Well, again, similar to me, except Sri Lanka being the place I came from. And later you moved to Melbourne to pursue a medical career. And beyond your role as a doctor and podcaster, you're a husband and father, and you launched your own podcast with the motivation to really create a financial blueprint for your family and something your children could learn from as well. I hope that does you justice, and thank you for all the work you put in just putting this out there.
Wonderful summary. Thank you very much. And you're right. I started the podcast predominantly as a 10-episode blueprint for my two children at the time who were very, very young, just in the rare event that I'm not around. And who knows? I mean, as you know, in the medical profession, anything happens. I mean, our entire profession is treating people that are ill. So, and I thought to myself, how do I leave a blueprint? And I'm a terrible writer because, I was thinking about a blog, but then I thought, I'm just terrible at writing. So I thought, I'm a reasonably good speaker. And I thought, why don't I just leave voice messages in the form of podcast? And that's how it all started. And I just had an iPhone when I first started. And never in my wildest dreams did I sort of imagine that people actually listen to it and actually benefit from it.
Yeah, it's funny because I started literally so I wouldn't have to repeat myself to trainees for the basic information. Hey, just watch my IV cannulation video, and then we can talk about more interesting high-level stuff and how to problem solve. So, it's a really great way of generating content when you just really want to do it for passing it on to someone else. You've got every episode, you reinforce these 5 tips or 5 lessons for investing or essentials for investing. Shall we just go through them? Because I just wholeheartedly believe in these tips. What are they?
Yeah, so I've kept it really simple based on what I've done in my life. So I think, the first step is you got to take a set amount of money and pay yourself first, yourself being the most important person in your life. I set that percentage to about 20% of after-tax money. Now, when I first started earning as an intern, I saved a lot of money, up to 50, 60%. I've sort of calmed down a little bit in terms of the percentage of earnings, but essentially set your percentage where you feel comfortable. You got to take that money and put it aside, and that's from after-tax money. The second step is you got to take that money and invest it, hopefully into productive assets that would increase in value over a long period of time. And hopefully during that time would also pay you some sort of an income or dividend, whether that be a rental property, whether that be a stock market, whether that be stashing it in your super. It doesn't really matter. You've got to put the money into an investment. The third step is hopefully that investment produces dividends or some sort of income. You got to make sure you reinvest that because that's where the power of compounding comes in. It's kind of like compound interest. The fourth step is you've got to do it for the long term. Now, I've always said that long term, in my view, is at least 20 years. Traditional financial people sort of say 5 to 7 years is long term based on what the stock market volatility and performance is. But essentially, the longer you do it, the better. The shorter you do it, the more risk it is for you to actually lose that capital or lose that money. And the last step is, where possible, just automate it. Automating just means that the whole process just happens automatically. You don't need to do it manually every single week or every single month, and therefore you won't forget. And in my experience, when I speak to particularly doctors, but most professions, the number one reason they don't have much invested is because they actually never save any money or put any money into it. That is actually the number one reason. It's not the returns, it's the fact that they actually don't put the money in. Whereas if you automate it, you never forget. Even if you fall sick, if you're for holidays, even if you're on, CME leave or whatever, even if at work, your money just keeps getting invested. And that's it. I've kept it as simple as I possibly can.
And just to reiterate those steps, so you just save 20% as a figure you give it, just do something, save it at some amount, investing, and you go into your podcast and various episodes about dollar cost averaging, which just pretty much means invest in a routine fashion throughout. So every month, every fortnight, every 6 months, whatever it is, do it for the long term, because then you avoid all the fluctuations of the market over the short period. Reinvest it. So often shares have that dividend reinvestment plan. That's pretty much like a tick box thing. So you don't even have to worry about repurchasing, and then automate it. And the automation, that's probably the one thing that I don't do, because I enjoy pressing the button to buy. Do you automate it via, like, say, Vanguard is, I assume, the one you use? Do you automate it through that, or is there a way you can automate it through the banks? Because on my net bank and whatever, I haven't really looked into that.
Yeah, so I bank with Commonwealth Bank. So essentially there is a way where you can set up recurrent payments from your savings account to another account.
Oh.
That account can be within CommBank in terms of a savings account, or that can be an external account, which is just a bank account. So my money goes from my CommBank account straight into my Vanguard cash account. And that happens on a weekly basis. And then from that Vanguard cash account, I've set up an automation within Vanguard, and that's through Personal Investor. Essentially, every week that money automatically goes into the ETFs, and you can actually split it. You can actually spread it as much as you want. Now, every broker would have some sort of a cash account if you're doing it in a sort of a stock market investing. So you just got to find what that cash account is, and you just literally go to your net bank and do a recurrent payment. It's almost like a BPay, but it's not. It's like a transfer process that you do. And that's it. Now, some brokers don't have the automation feature from within the broker. So let's say if you're with a particular broker, the money goes into the cash account. Some brokers make you log into the brokerage firm and then manually invest that money. If your broker makes you do that, I'm not a great fan of that, because you still have to do it manual, and whenever there's a manual component, there's always going to be potential errors and risks. But most brokers now have that automation feature as well. And I've been doing it for years and years and years.
Yeah, amazing. I was actually just kind of going through some financial advice with some of my mates who just want to start. Like, I just want them to start. And I showed them the spreadsheet of what, they're on pretty high salaries, so probably not the junior doctor level, but they're saving like 150, 200 a year. And I just showed them even conservative at a 5% interest rate, when you're saving like a consultant wage, from the age of 38, like let's say they start at 100,000 and then put in 150 and then a 5% rate, they get to a figure of that, that's really decent for retirement by the age of 57. And that's a conservative strategy. That's a conservative way of calculating it. But, you'll get to your 5 million retirement fund amount. And, you definitely look at the 4% rule in your podcast, because I'll explain a bit of that. But whatever your retirement amount is, you get that to that pretty, decently quickly with conservative numbers. So that's why this works. You just have that long-term vision, and you're constantly saving and reinvesting and automating. Yeah.
Look, most doctors don't struggle with income. Income is not really their problem. We're very fortunate enough on average. Even the average intern, I'm in the state of Victoria, is around between $80,000 to $100,000 a year. If you compare that to any other profession, accountancy, lawyers, engineers, that's a pretty damn good salary. And of course, from that, it always goes up. It's probably the only profession we're pretty much guaranteed for the next sort of 5 to 10 years, a significant income rise. And of course, when you become a consultant, if you do a bit of private, that income rise exponentially rises. So income's never been a problem. It's more about putting a bit of thought into how much you want to save and how much you want to invest, and really doing it like that. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people contact me on Facebook or Twitter and say, I want to invest. And then literally like 12 months later, I've just like Facebook them back, say, hey, how's everything going? Like, have you started? Have you seen a financial advisor? And they're like, nah. And I'm like, really? Like that, it's been 12 months. And it's actually quite common, that problem. And doctors especially are vulnerable, particularly your non-GP specialists, because life takes over. You know, you might meet a partner, you might have kids, you got exams. I mean, anaesthetics, of course, you got exams, every other year. So all of that takes over. And of course, then the investing and the whole looking after yourself, pay yourself first because you're the most important person, that kind of gets put to the back. And I think that's a real risk.
So I've actually got a few rules, and it actually relates directly to this thing, because I know that I went through the same thing. I had no bandwidth for thinking about how to invest beyond buying my first property back in the day. And I was like, actually, it's okay, because the best investment I did was just focus on anesthetic training, and that's given me everything and the financial freedom I need. But my rules are, learning from that experience, do something, not nothing, because you have to be in this game, because otherwise your cash will just depreciate over time and you will not be able to get financially independent, except by luck probably. So first rule, do nothing. Second rule, live below your means, which means effectively you'll be paying yourself hopefully 20% or more. Second is to diversify. I mean, you've got to diversify on various things. And for most people, it's super and shares could be everything. There's index funds diversify through everything, but also property. And then I've got this thing of 5% of your wealth for something you believe in. And for me, that's crypto. And then insure yourself, because that'll be the fourth rule. Insure yourself because you've got to protect yourself from the big stuff. So life insurance, income protection, health insurance, car insurance, and various property insurances. So nothing big and bad happens. And then the last two things which have been kind of added on is to reassess every 6 months, because it probably feels good that it's tracking along nicely, and potentially rebalance every 5 to 10 years, because there is that thought of, once as the decades move on, you need to have more stable assets over shares, which can be, fixed interest bonds and cash. But your super also does that pretty well. What do you on face value, what do you think of those as some extension of the rules?
I think there's two things there. You've thought about it. That's really important. Most doctors don't think about these things, and most doctors don't even know these concepts. So kudos to you of actually thinking about it. And it's relatively simple. You can explain that to a 10-year-old, and they would be able to understand that. So you don't need complex Cayman Islands trust fund structures in order to become, reasonably wealthy. When I say reasonably wealthy, it's about $5-10 million as a doctor. It's not that complicated. You can make it complicated if you wanted to, but I think those concepts are very sound, very simple, and they're reproducible to pretty much any profession.
So I'd say the biggest hurdle that doctors will fall into, if we move to that, is the fact that if you don't have an investing culture in your family, you will not know how to open that first share trading account, and you'll probably have bought a decent property, maybe it's a family property, and that will set you back in the investment journey quite a bit. So I'd say if there's one thing that doctors could get in, just to start with the habit, just set up your CommState account or NMB Trade account or Robinhood or whatever it is. And even if it's just investing, $1,000 every month or every 6 months, at least you've got the reps. So you've got the muscle memory of doing that, so that when you do eventually pay off your principal places of residence, then you've got the habit of it. And hopefully you'll see that the shares have grown as well. So you realize that actually this is a really easy thing to do. Because pretty much everyone I've talked to, same thing. They say they want to invest, and 12 months later, how have you gone? Oh, you haven't set up the account? It's so easy to set up an account. You just have to do it.
I agree. And in terms of buying a house, now that we're talking about buying a house, what traditionally a lot of doctors do is that they make a lot of money and they go to the bank and say, what is my maximum borrowing capacity? Red flag, because obviously the bank will say your maximum borrowing capacity is significant. Now, what I did was, I did it your way, where I started investing and went to the bank and said, I'm investing after-tax income of 20% on average. Therefore, I want you to only consider 80% of my after-tax income and give me a loan that's suitable. So in the rare event that the interest rates went up or something bad happened, I still had the 20% buffer that was happening in the background. And worst case scenario, as an emergency, I could stop investing. I had emergency funds to cover it. But I think absolutely right. Get started investing and then buy a house, but don't buy like, a house that you possibly can't afford, or there's so much little wiggle room that if something bad were to happen in terms of your life or, in terms of health or family emergencies or interest rates. I mean, what happened between 2022 to 2024 when the interest rates started going up? Absolute panic.
Yeah, people were really struggling then. So probably it's a good time to then talk about the traps that lots of doctors fall into. And it is, I guess, houses fall into the lifestyle creep. It's very hard to, when your mate has a really nice mansion or in a really nice suburb, to be okay with your lesser place, or the fact that once you fly business class or first class, it's very hard to step back down to a lesser class of travel or hotels or whatever it is. How do you manage that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think delayed gratification, I was really good at that, to be honest. Our first home, I didn't buy it was actually a shoebox in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. I bought it for $390,000. And I bought it because someone else bought it. And then they, in the cooling off period, they said they don't want it because the feng shui wasn't right. I'm like, oh, great. This is my first break in terms of buying a house. So, not overcommitting, not going for the maximum borrowing capacity. That's actually a very common trap. And I think, Laz, you would see it online on the doctors' forums for investing, and also on Reddit. People are constantly wanting to buy the biggest house they possibly can. Admittedly, Dev Raga bought a house in 2009 when prices were relatively cheap. But of course, even back then, 2009 was at the peak of the housing market when I bought it. In fact, when I bought a $390,000 house, I felt that I paid too much for it. So just be really careful about what the bank will offer you and just restrain yourself and have that delayed gratification. The second thing is, we traveled, but we didn't travel, on business class. And even now, we don't always travel in business class. I'm very frugal in terms of, how much money that I spend when we go on travel. We would much rather spend money on experiences at the destination than actually the experience of getting to the destination. So we definitely, stay in really, really nice hotels because I feel that that's very valuable for myself and my family. So completely fine to travel. But, you don't need to travel at the highest class. I mean, it's nice to put up Facebook photos and sort of, subtle brag about where you've been around the world. That's all fine, but just be a little bit careful about it. The other thing is,
that's the solution, to not be on social media.
Just turn it off.
Yeah,
turn it off.
What someone else has, and then you'll be fine.
Exactly. The other thing that I've come across in my experience speaking to doctors is, buying cars. So again, it sounds so cliche. Probably the highest risk is when you achieved your fellowship. It's almost as if, in fact, one of the doctors said, I feel like I deserve a good car. And when you think you deserve things, that's a red flag. When you start using the language of, I deserve this because I've done 10 years of anesthetic training or surgical training, or I've done 5 years of general practice training, so I deserve this. I'm a specialist now. When you start thinking like that, that is a red flag. And 99% of the time when I speak to these doctors who think like this, they haven't sorted out their insurance. They haven't sorted out their will and estate planning. They often don't have an emergency fund, and they don't have a regular investing philosophy or investing cycle. So I say to them, look, I'm not against buying a big house or a nice car or going on holidays, but just do it in a different order. Do all the other stuff first and then do all this later, which is what I did. I focused on the basics, delayed gratification, which I think in 2025 is much harder to do than what it was when I first bought my house in 2009.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the one thing I realized listening to the Minimalist podcast, they talk about really minimizing minimizing a lot of stuff in your life, but yet having experiences and connections and all those things. But if something really brings you joy, yeah, then lean into that. And I always thought, yeah, cars don't really bring me that much joy, so I'm not going to go to get the most ridiculous car, because it'll just be a little dopamine hit for a bit. Whereas if it was something that I really care about, like experiences, I just go, yeah, whatever I want, I'm going to do, because that's memories and that's what I really care about. So yeah, maybe that is the kind of ethos to have. If you love snowboarding, yeah, great. Have your 10 snowboards. Or if you love playing guitar, have your antique Fender. But yeah, there's probably only a few things that you really are passionate about, and that's probably financially totally fine.
I agree. I had Jim Collins on my podcast recently, and he explained it really well.
Yes.
So going back to the topic of cars, when people buy really expensive cars, you go buy a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes or whatever, what people think is that when you're driving that car, people think that other people are admiring you in the car. Actually, what people are admiring is they're thinking about how they would look in that car. They're not admiring you at all. And some people truly admire the car. And that is a phenomenal way to look at it, right? So I also, used to think that if I was to drive a flashy car, people look at Dev Raga and say, wow, look at this guy, so successful. Then I realized, well, they're looking at the car, then they're imagining them in that car. They don't really give a crap about Dev Raga. Oh, can I say crap? Do you want to edit that out?
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't really give a crap about Dev Raga. They like the car and they want to know how they look like it. I thought that was a really interesting perspective, and I think that's quite true.
Yeah. Interesting. I do think that the person, if I see someone driving a car, I go, oh, wow, that's a nice car that they're driving in. But I also just think how much debt they have. And then I think like back to if you could see that if you didn't spend the $100K on a car and you got a $20,000 car instead, or $30,000, whatever, that $80K invested over time means that you might be able to retire when you're 40. Like, if you just think about what that means for you in post-payment gratification, that's amazing. And that's probably what I'd encourage everyone to just keep thinking in their heads. What will that $80K do later?
That concept is called opportunity cost. Essentially, if you took that $80K and invested it and ended up with, let's say, $500,000 over a course of 30, 40 years, essentially what you've done, La, is you've bought a $500,000 car. That's actually only worth $80,000. So that's a classic opportunity cost. And opportunity cost can be measured in dollars, can also be measured in time. So if you're a consultant anaesthetist and you've taken 10 years to become a consultant anaesthetist, those 10 years is opportunity cost that if you hadn't started investing, then that time, obviously the most important resource, non-renewable, you've lost forever.
Yeah. What do you think of the other trap? And this is so, I guess it's one of those pain points in training, that there's so many good people that won't get the anesthetic training job. And it just hurts me, because life isn't fair. And, there's certainly not enough, but it's still, in Australia, it's still not a zero-sum game, because there's so many opportunities. What do you think of that? Believing that one specialist path is for you?
Got to have a backup. So my routine recommendation for junior doctors now is you got to have a backup. And of course, keep it to yourself. Don't tell anyone. You don't have to tell the colleges. You're not going to apply for the College of Anaesthetics and say, I want to be an anaesthetist, but my backup is being a surgeon. And they won't like that. But you just need to think diversification. I mean, when you think about investments, look at my investments right now. I've diversified into super. I've diversified into ETFs. I've got a few properties. So I've diversified my investments. I think your career, you got to have a diversification approach to your career. And also, when you become a consultant anaesthetist, you may want to diversify your work options. Some of you work in public, some of you work in private, some of you work in multiple public. So absolutely important, especially in a field like anesthetics. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, it is one of the most competitive fields to get into still. It always has been, but I think it's actually a lot worse now. It's actually much more difficult to get in. So you can't rely on the fact that you will get into anesthetics. Just like when you apply to medical school, I tell high school students, you can't rely on one university. You got to apply nationally or New Zealand. You have to.
Absolutely. Let's move on to index funds. So from everything I've seen online, evidence-based managed funds just don't beat index funds over any appreciable long period of time. And I think 20% of the time when managed funds do beat index funds, that's just luck. They can't reproduce that over the 30-year time frame. So I try to be as diversified in my investments. So I pretty much just repeat NDQ, which is the NASDAQ index, and VGS, which is the world index, and then VAS, which is Australian stocks. And I mainly do Australian stocks isn't in itself well diversified, which is very banking and mining heavy, but you get franking credits, which is the whole thing. Again, look that up on your podcast to go into it. So that's pretty much the 3 indexes that I buy. And maybe I'll start buying VHY, which is the high index Australian index fund, or high yield fund from Vanguard. And that's got excellent returns, but I'll probably start transitioning to that more through the next decades as I get close to retirement. Why index funds? Which ones do you invest? And is there any risk to an index fund?
Yeah, so I'll tell you why an index fund. First of all, it's easy, it's really simple, and it's cheap. So we know what compounds. Fees also compound. So a lot of them retail managed funds that actively, try and invest and try and beat the market have no problems against it. But I'm lazy. I'm happy with the market returns, and it just turns out the market returns have been pretty good over the last sort of 30 to 50 years, if not longer. And it also turns out the market returns are not routinely beatable unless you're one of those super whiz, Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger or Paul Tudor Jones and all these people. I'm not them. I'm a doctor. My specialty is to treat patients, just like your specialty is to treat patients. So I think if you are a professional like a doctor thinking that you can consistently beat the market over 20, 30, 40 years' time, I think good luck to you, but it's the stats are against you. The evidence is against you. And also remember, when you retire, you want to take the path of least resistance where you don't have to worry about actively investing, So that's why indexing works. The other thing about index is that it's a self-cleansing mechanism. So essentially, when you buy an index, it has the top companies in that index. And if you have a broadly diversified index, that's it, which means it's self-cleansing. So when the companies get off the index because they haven't been performing well, new companies come up and become part of the index. So by definition, you're always investing in the biggest and brightest companies run by hopefully the brightest individuals from everywhere, from the CEO to the cleaner, is working very hard to make you rich. I don't see how that process is a bad process. Now, there is a risk of indexing.
It is survival of the fittest of the company.
Pretty much.
Every rebalancing, the best companies stay and the worst companies go.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So by definition, you always invested in hopefully the brightest companies around the world or in Australia, whatever. Now, you did mention about the risk of indexing, and I think the term index, I think we've got to be careful how we use it. I'm talking about passively managed ETF or managed index funds, which are entirely passive. So you don't actually pick and choose the specific companies. Sometimes you do buy indexes that are actively managed, and I'm not talking about those because they're the ones that often underperform the market over a very long time.
Yes.
Now, the other risk of indexing is you've got to make sure that you're broadly diversified. So, for example, in your case, if you look at all of your funds, you're diversified into the United States tech market, you're diversified into the global markets, and you're diversified into the Australian market. So essentially, you've got a piece of every single pie out there. But you can get passively managed index funds only in specific sectors, which I don't normally do, because I wouldn't buy a passively managed index fund only for banks in Australia, for example. Because what's the point of indexing? You're actually, committing the antithesis of diversification. You're concentrating your risk. So just because you're indexing doesn't mean that it'll always be diversified. You've got to be careful that that particular index fund is passively managed and it's diversified very broadly, geographically, and also sector-wise and industry-wise and company-wise. In terms of what I do, again, I'm a very lazy, simple person. I have very diversified indexing within my super, which is international, and that includes North America, Asia, Europe, Australia. And outside of my superannuation, I just hold VAS. So why have I done that? The reason is because of the franking credits, because the chances are I'm not going to be working full time until I'm officially retired. In Australia, the official retirement age is 67. I'm allowed to touch my super at the age of 60, which is preservation age. But I'm not going to be working till I'm 60. I'm probably not even going to be working till I'm 50. So I need some sort of income source to bridge my time between the time of retirement, my retirement, and the actual time that I can touch my super, which is why I've got a significant asset portfolio outside of super, and my super will definitely reach, whatever thresholds there are to reach. So my plan is to bridge my assets, use it to live on it until I reach my preservation age, and then I'll get access to my superannuation. And that's one of the flaws of super, because it's my money, but I can't access it till I'm 60, which actually works perfectly fine because, I don't want to touch it. I can't touch it. So hence that's why I've split that way. Now, I do have a few properties. I've just sort of realized that it's a bit of a pain to have properties in terms of dealing with tenants and real estate agents. So I've moved away from properties. The last one that I bought was in 2021. I haven't bought any new properties since then. And I don't think I will, because I've just realized that as I'm getting older, I don't want to be managing properties. I can't be bothered.
Yeah, after a certain number, it becomes not quite a full-time job, but a job. It's just not. Hey, so just to clarify, your super, and that probably has an extremely good diversification in international Australian infrastructure and cash.
Bonds,
right?
cash, property, etc. Yep.
And then just VAS.
Yep, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. In terms of super, just one of the tips I got from the Barefoot Investor, so I changed my fund into Host Plus Index Fund just because of that exact thing. Like, I think for my balance at the time, Hester was charging me probably something like $100 versus or $500 management versus $50. And it was just, I'm definitely going to do what the Barefoot Investor said and go with that Host Plus Index Fund. But yeah, whatever you can do, even in super with an index fund, which is passively managed, is really useful.
Just about super, right? As long as you stick to your super fund, that's relatively low cost in industry super fund, I think you're okay. I think once you get down to, my super fund overall fees, everything inclusive admin fee is around 0.2% of portfolio. My index fund in super is about 0.04%. So that's pretty low. And then everything inclusive is around 0.2%. I think if you keep your superannuation fees less than 0.5%, I think you're doing reasonably well. But most people often don't know, most doctors that I speak to don't know who they're super with, which is actually quite tragic.
Yeah.
Don't know what it's invested in, because 9 times out of 10, it's invested in this what's called balanced portfolio,
yes,
which often has a fee structure of about 0.8, 0.9% plus admin fee.
Yeah.
And to be surprised, like, a lot of doctors don't even know how to log into their super. So as long as you keep, I'm all about principles. If you keep your fees less than 0.5% in your super, I think you're doing reasonably well. And I think, the lower the better, of course. But don't be too stressed. Like if it's like 0.3, 0.4, I think that's okay. You don't need to, constantly change. But you probably went, when Barefoot Investor wrote his book, at the time, I think Host Plus had the lowest fees.
The only one which had an index fund. So I think
correct.
By the balanced index or index balance, but just be careful. There's another one that sounds the same, which is managed, which, it would still do well. It's just, I just believed in passive index funds with very low cost.
Keep it simple. And I think at the time that was the only one. I think now pretty much all the major industry super funds have some sort of index option within their portfolio. And it's a matter of just logging in and actually looking at it.
Yeah. So let's move on to public hospital benefits. This is something that I never really had a sense of when I was a junior doctor, and I accidentally did the right thing. So just to give a brief outline, I just went straight through my training. Never took a year off. And, again, my mates did, and it was just such a valuable thing for them to do that. So I'd never begrudge anyone taking a year off to do something they want at the right time in their life. But it just happened that I went through training, my junior doctor year's training. So I just kept on getting my group certificates, at the end. Sorry, not group certificates, but the certificate at the end.
Certificate of service.
Certificate of service, sorry.
Yeah. Statement of service is the other way they do it. Yeah.
You literally just contact payroll at the end of your at the end of your job rotation, whatever it is, and then pass it on to the next employer, and they will transition all of your sick leave entitlements and your long service leave that you've accrued. So after 10 years in Victoria, suddenly you've got 17 weeks of long service leave. And often people will then become a consultant around that time. And that means that a consultant pay, you have 17 weeks of long service leave, which you can divide into half pay. So that's, 34 weeks of long service leave at half pay. And this is an amazing entitlement that's historically, I think, because it took so long to get a ship back to the UK, you needed to provide long service leave to your employees. But I didn't know that. I had very little insight into this, except that, I don't know, I must have looked at my entitlements and went, great, I'm going to roll this over every time. And the number of people that don't do this is pretty much everyone I know. And it's been a game changer for my work life.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. There's so much to unpack there. So let me go through that with you, right, for the audience. So if you're absolutely right, that's called leave arbitrage. So that concept is called leave arbitrage, right? So essentially every hour that you don't take leave as a junior doctor, and again, leave is really important to prevent burnout, all that sort of stuff, but I'm just giving you a bit of a broad understanding. Every hour that you don't take leave, that hour accumulates over a period of time, and in your case, 10 or 15 years of time, and that 1 hour of leave at a consultant rate is worth potentially 5 to 10 times more than the same 1 hour of leave had you taken it as a junior doctor.
And I couldn't, it's specifically long service I'm talking about. So I couldn't have taken it before the 10 years anyway. So
correct. Exactly. Yep. And, some hospitals obviously accumulate sick leave as well. So if you use up all your sick leave as a junior doctor, you'll get 10 days every year, I think it is in most states. But if you don't use up the 10 days, whatever's left over gets reaccumulated and rolled over. And that's really, really valuable if you actually fall sick and you need to use that leave. Let me give you an example. I was speaking to an emergency medicine specialist who just graduated, and unfortunately they had a really serious illness soon after they've graduated as an emergency medicine specialist. Thankfully, all of that sick leave, they've done the right thing as what you did, has been accumulated, and they had about a good 700 hours of sick leave, which is basically like their personal insurance. So they could actually, take sick leave, look after themselves, support the family, have an income stream, and then come back to work and then continue working. Imagine if you didn't have that. You lose income, you potentially can't pay your bills, more stressors for your partner, kids also getting anxious because there's a lot of things that you need to do for kids. They're not cheap. So absolutely important to know that. You did mention about take a year off. So we'll step back. So when you take a year off, when you finish in a public hospital, in hospital one, and you move on to the next hospital, you have a set period of time where you can actually get that certificate of service or statement of service. If you leave it for too long, then you lose whatever entitlements, the long service leave entitlements and sick leave entitlements that you may have accumulated. So if you take a year off, if you just say, you know what, I'm going to locum, which is a very common thing that people do. If you want to do that, that's completely fine, but at least maintain some public hospital employment fraction or whatever it is. Go do your locum. As long as you have a continuous service, you are protected, right? And in some states, that can even be a casual service with a once a month shift or whatever in a casual capacity. But what a lot of people do is after internship and HMO, they take a year off and they travel. And of course, all that leave that they've accumulated is gone. So when you come back and get a new job, it resets, which means all of your sick leave entitlements and long service leave entitlements, if you're actually entitled for that, never actually accumulate. You got to restart at zero. Now you're a registrar, okay? So you become a consultant, and then you want to take another year off because you want to do something else. Again, it resets. Imagine if you strategized it and you didn't take significant breaks and maybe just maintained a part-time or casual capacity like what you did. After 10 or 12 years of training, you might have 30 weeks of long service leave at half pay. It's a great opportunity to take that at a consultant wage and maybe look at other options like private practice, which is what like people that strategize often do that. They become a consultant and then they either travel or they have a family or they do a bit of private practice and build up their base while they're getting a public income. So for all the junior doctors listening in, strategize make sure you understand what your entitlements are, and don't just go chasing for locum rates or whatever. Just make sure that you protect your base entitlements. And that would be that. You're right. It is so common that we stuff it up.
And just to, there's so many ways that the hospital system might accidentally mess this up for you. So, just make sure that, your end date at one site is the day before the start date as the next site. And just a quick thing about, when I was looking into this, you can check with your employer, when you do take long service, you can't do any extra work that you didn't have already before the long service. So you can't start generating private technically, as far as I know. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of other entitlements like, maternity and even CME is probably something to, worth talking about, just to the fact that we should learn our entitlements, read the document, because there's lots of good things in there.
That's right. So CME is continuing medical education allowance for junior doctors, usually gets paid into your wage in Victoria. In other states, it might be slightly different. And when you become a consultant in Victoria, you continue to get the medical education allowance, but they don't pay into it. You've got to reclaim it. And it's up to $30,000 a year for full-time equivalent in the public space. Now, parental leave, absolutely. You're entitled to parental leave. And when you go on parental leave, it is your right to return back to the same position as you had. They can't get rid of you. I think you have that entitlement, correct me if I'm wrong, up to 2 years since the start of your parental leave as well. And also flexible working arrangements. So when you come back from any sort of leave, if you can't do your work in the same capacity or full-time equivalent, then employers are obliged to provide you with a flexible working arrangement. So if you're a single parent and you need a flexible working arrangement, I think it's worthwhile, speaking to your employer. If they're giving you a hard time, then you'd go to the Australian Medical Association, which I hope all of you are members of, and seek some advice about it. Because at the end of the day, I believe that doctors generally want to show up to work, be treated fairly, get paid adequately so that they can do a good job. I mean, no one ever turns up to work to, hurt people or cause chaos. I shouldn't say no one, but the vast majority don't, right? So in return for that, you're entitled. You're entitled to a safe working environment, to flexible working arrangement. You're entitled to, CME leave. You're entitled to CME allowance, of course, sick leave, carers leave, other types of personal leave, bereavement leave, which is extra leave, actually. It's not part of your sick leave. Some of the hospitals might say, bereavement leave is part of your sick leave. Actually, it's not. It's a separate leave. And in Victoria, actually, this is something a lot of consultants don't know. If you're a full-time consultant, there is that clause in the EBA which says you can get up to 28 days sick leave, not just 10. Whereas if you're fractional, then it's basically based on how much you work. So, these are all little things that you basically in your state, just Google it, enterprise bargaining agreement or whatever you call it in your state, and just read it. I often just open it up and just do a search, like a keyword search, even like serious misconduct or, performance management. There are some certain rules that people need to manage. So, and I can tell you right now, hospitals don't tell you this.
No.
And obviously they don't tell you this for, it's your responsibility, but they'll say, well, it's up to the doctor. Because if they tell you this, then dare I say that they'll be losing a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in your interest to know this, and it's not in anyone else's interest to know this. You really have to take responsibility for a lot of this stuff, which again, we're so focused on being doctors, but at the end of the day, you're getting paid for a job. So in a way, in some ways, your financial freedom and knowledge about this is actually the whole point of working in general. No matter how great and inspirational you are in your career is, at the end of the day, you're getting paid for something. If you don't know what to do with your money, it's a real problem for you.
Absolutely. I had a recent question from a registrar who was studying for their exams, and they thought that CME leave was the same as examination leave. And I'm in the state of Victoria. It's actually two separate leaves. So CME leave is one type of leave for conference leave or seminar leave, whatever. But exam leave is completely separate. You're actually entitled to a separate examination leave, I think up to 8 days. And in CME leave, there is a clause in the Victorian EBA, at least, that all hospitals have to give you 1 week, but it's by private negotiation. If your hospital wants to give you up to 3 weeks, they can. And the other quirk I should say is, nowadays there's a lot of trainees that are getting outsourced or do their training program in the private sector. So it's actually very common in Victoria, where surgical trainees might go to a private hospital, or emergency trainees might go to a private hospital. So in the past, there was a sort of thing about trainees never went to the private hospital. They always stuck around the public hospital system, and therefore they can maintain their service. Now, the EBA specifically says, even for general practice trainees who go to private clinics, that is included as part of your service. So just because you go to a private system and do your training there doesn't mean you're excluded. When you come back to the public system, all those entitlements would follow you through.
Oh, that's great, isn't it? Oh, that's so good. I think the last thing we should talk about is legacy planning. It's something that I've really neglected to do. But there's so much that you should be very careful of, because if you create all this wealth and something happens, where it goes is going to be absolutely in your interests. What would be the take homes with legacy planning?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things about, when I say pay yourself first, I also mean look after yourself first. And by yourself, it means yourself, your loved ones, your friends, your family, etc. And part of that is, what you said earlier in the episode about insurance. Make sure that you have life insurance. Make sure you get income protection insurance. Make sure you get advice on these things. You don't have to go via your bank if you don't want to. Get an advisor to do it. So that's, protecting your legacy, because you want to protect your downside. You don't want to lose any money before you start making money. In terms of long-term legacy planning, it's about structuring and, will and estate planning, right? Surprisingly, for a profession that literally treats sick people, which is what we do, a lot of doctors don't have will and estate planning. And I think you alluded to me that it's something that you're considering now, right? So I find that really fascinating. That's one of the first things that I considered. I thought, I'm going to be worth, me and my wife, my kids, we're going to be worth a lot of money. How do we protect it? It's kind of like building a house. You got to have a good foundation. You got to prep the soil properly. So you need to go to a specified will and estate planning lawyer who will go through the whole process with you, and it's going to cost you at around $3,000 or $4,000, right?
So that's a decent amount of money, actually.
That's decent. I mean, if you're a junior doctor, that's a lot of money. And you may not need a complex set of wills as a junior doctor. It's something that you probably need to review every 5 or 10 years. But I've spoken to so many consultants who are on at least $700,000 a year that don't have a will. And I'm like, really? That's $4,000 out of your income. Surely you can just do that. And it's about finding the time and the right person.
Tax deductible by any chance?
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not. But, spend that $4,000, get a will for yourself, your partner, look after your kids by employing a guardian, which is also part of the process. I mean, who's going to look after the kids if, for whatever reason, both of you pass away? Or if you're a single parent, that's even more risky. You got to have a will, because if you're gone, there's no one else to protect your children. So, and as part of the will and estate planning, think about who you want the executor to be. It's a very important position. And of course, as part of that is medical power of attorney, or medical treatment decision maker, they call it in Victoria, financial power of attorney, and also a testamentary trust. So essentially, when you die, your portfolio and your money goes into a trust. And the reason for that is you want to make sure a trust is for the sole beneficiary of the people that you want to help in the will, which is your immediate family members, to make sure that people that you don't want money to be distributed to don't access your wealth over time. And it's relatively basic. I think $4,000 in the scheme of things every 10 years, it's actually not that bad. Given that you go to you could have a weekend getaway that's going to cost $4,000. So for something so important, it's definitely worth it. So think about it, and think about all the things that we do as doctors that are risky: flying on a plane, driving a car. You know, you mentioned snowboarding. I've never actually been snowboarding, but I'm assuming it's you know, prone with injuries. You know, horse riding. A lot of people do horse riding, and of course, you know, tragic circumstances where, you know, doctors do get sick. I've in my career, I've probably had about two doctors have passed away. One of them, a close friend during training with pancreatic cancer.
Wow.
And more recently, you know, colleagues, ward clerks, nurses, other doctors getting diagnosed with really, really nasty things, and it can happen. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, why do I do this? I do it because obviously I want to protect, you know, my wealth, but the most important thing is my family. I mean, what's the point of being, you know, a gazillionaire, and then when I'm gone, if my family are not protected, I would not have done my job as best as I possibly could have.
Yep. That's it's so important. And I'm just thinking, yeah, I think it's pretty much the fact that I don't have family and kids immediately that I'm responsible for. I've just let this slide, but you know, at the end of the day, there's so much that I'll want to pass on, and yeah, it's definitely something I should put on the list now.
It's. I used to be an aged care GP, and it's actually a very common problem in aged care. And of course, there's a lot of death in aged care. You would be surprised who comes out of the woodwork when someone dies. And I used to get a lot of requests for witnessing documents and death certificates and things like that, so that they could access the estate of the deceased. And I'm like, who are you? Like, I never saw you visit your mum or your dad in aged care over the last 7 years that I've been looking after them. Who are you? And you sort of go, man, that is risky. So if you don't have a will, it's probably worthwhile me explaining the sort of a process. If you don't have a will, there is a process, certainly state by state. It's called dying intestate. So basically, there is a process where your assets are sort of distributed according to an algorithm. But if there's someone in that algorithm that you don't specifically want the assets to go to, and you don't have a will, it just makes it so much more complicated for your family. So having a will gives you complete flexibility in terms of who you want your assets to go to.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Hey, Dev, that's been so interesting and fascinating, and it's just so relevant. Again, just want to reiterate that, whatever training program you're in this case, probably anesthetics that you're trying to get into, just remember, it's not, the long game isn't the career, even though that's everything you're going to be thinking about right now, that all you want to do is know how to give an anesthetic and put a drip in and intubate and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, you do that job to get financially secure, and the way to do this is these steps. And even if you don't get onto training with anesthetics, you still won the lottery that you could just locum or do another job or do another specialty, and you'll be absolutely fine. And it's one of those things, you never know what the right decision is, because life is long and you can't imagine all the different variables. And as long as you make if you make the best of every moment that you're in, then you'll probably absolutely fine, if not better than some other pathway that you thought was the best thing for you. So yeah, maybe to recap those essentials for investing. So yeah, I'll let you go through it, Dev.
Yeah, so the 5 steps: pay yourself first, invest that money, reinvest the dividends, do it for the long term, and automate where possibly you can. And of course, bringing on what you said, Lara, about protecting yourself, cover yourself with insurance, and also have a legacy planning. Those are the main things. You don't need to get all the minutiae correct. You just need to get the major things correct, and everything else will kind of just falls into place. And I can tell you right now, the number one reason when I speak to wealthy doctors as to why they're wealthy, they never said, I became wealthy because I arbitraged credit card points. It's never happened. Yeah. They've never said that I've become wealthy because I bought a Ferrari as a fellow. It's never happened. They've never said that I became wealthy because I became a specialist. In fact, you hit the nail on the head. It's not what specialty you do, is when you start investing. And they never said that I've become wealthy because I've just spent crap loads of money and never saved any money. 99% of the time, the people that build wealth do it slowly. They do it consistently. They do it the boring way. They may have a little bit of fun on the side, but at this, they've got their core principles right. And they are people that believe in delayed gratification. They don't listen to noise. They often don't follow things on Facebook or Twitter all the time. They sort of monitor it, but they don't really respond to it. And they don't react to things. They just continue the simple pathway and keep their expenses as low as possible. It's a repetitive phenomenon and it's ridiculously boring, but it works.
And maybe, not to end on a whole other topic, one of the things that will happen to you as you become more wealthy or as you become a consultant is people will have lots of ventures, and they'll be very exciting ventures, whether it's as an angel investor or something venture capital like, or even starting your own business. And just to know that may succeed very rarely in a big way. It'll be a lot of work, but the absolute best way to create wealth is not rolling the dice on a new business, because chances are you're bad at business. Chances are you're probably good at being a doctor and you're probably very bad at business or some level of average at business. But if you just did the boring stuff, you'd be far better off than if you put all that money into something exciting like buying a gym or, rolling the dice on some angel investing fund.
Coffee shop. I get a fair bit of that. To be honest, I love coffee and I would love to own a coffee shop. But it turns out I know nothing about a coffee shop. So I just invest in things I know and understand.
Run by people who are very good at business.
Exactly. Yeah. And being a doctor is completely different to being a business person. And, some doctors are great at business. Most doctors are not good at business.
Yeah. Anything trendy, cafes, bars, gyms, probably bad.
I think cafes are probably, to be honest, it's a side dream of mine, which I'll never achieve. But it'll be nice to own a nice boutique cafe shop. But I know I'll never do it because I don't know anything about, I don't even know where to source the coffee beans, to be honest.
But do it for the love of the thing, not to make money necessarily. Yeah.
That's right. And it turns out if you're financially independent, you can sort of blow money on these sort of side projects. And if you remember, money doesn't make you happy or, make things, the best in your life. It just gives you options.
Yeah.
So I sort of reflect on my career and I went, you know what? I have options now. If I want to go somewhere, if I want to, quit a job, or if I don't want to do something, or I've got options. I don't think it's made me any happier, to be honest. In fact, something that we discuss about it at home all the time.
Yeah, it's connections. Hey, Dev, I think that's something great to end on. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode. I hope you got so much out of it. And please go for all the detail of it. Pretty much everything we talked about is on Dev's podcast, and the name of that podcast being Dev Raga Personal Finance. Please have a look at it. Start from the first episodes because it's there's a lot of the basics are in the first few episodes, and then just have a look, and it's a real joy to listen to them. I just think it'll be well worth anyone's time to just slowly chip away at all those episodes and just get started on this journey. Do something, live below your means, diversify, pay yourself, invest, dollar cost average, all these automated, all these worthwhile terms that you will hopefully know very soon. Thanks very much for listening, everyone. See you next time.
Now, what's new with ABCs of Anesthesia is that we're forming a whole bunch of very comprehensive courses for every stage of your anesthetic journey, from medical student to procedural skills, from foundations in anesthesia, as well as really important exam lectures and clinical anesthesia courses as well.